a young woman, I knew that I wanted to work in corporate America. But being the daughter of an immigrant housewife, I did not have woman role models who worked in business to emulate until I met Donna. Donna was the only vice president in the company. She was tall and raven hair, and she commanded every room she walked into. I would watch her in admiration, how she handled meetings, being the only woman in leadership. I observed how she would get her point across, how she would hold her poise and gracefully and generously create connection and communicate with people at all levels. So she made sure that I was invited to gatherings, that I was invited to events, and she facilitated social interactions where I could get exposure, what I needed to grow in my career. You see, it was through these social interactions and connections, the role modeling, the coaching, the mentoring that she provided for me, that I started to formulate my identity as a professional woman who was out to create equity in the world. The great promise of the internet is that it was meant to connect people from around the world like no ever. But we have seen the opposite happen as digital interactions have rapidly replaced in-person interactions. In a global study, it was found that half of the workforce feels lonely as the result of using technology to communicate versus in-person meetings. This lack of social connection and feeling isolated actually has an impact on organizations. They're hit with lower productivity, and matter of fact, 30 to 45% of the workforce is not engaged. $450 billion impact annually to organizations. So, here's the thing, they actually need connectedness in the workplace, right? So we might think that this was all in reliance of technology, that we have this issue. So in fact, we're actually facing a global connectedness epidemic. Communities are starting to fall apart as technology replaces face-to-face interactions. The Economist recently did a study and found 22%, that's a quarter of the population of American adults, stated that they were lonely. People from all over the world are actually feeling disconnected. In some countries, they report that they have not spoken to a loved one close to them in months. As human beings, we are social creatures. We need connection. Research shows there is a core psychological need for us to be connected. People who are connected are less anxiety, have less depression, they're more empathetic, they actually have more self-esteem, as well as the fact that they are good cooperative workmates. The World Economic Forum published the top 10 in-demand skills for 2020. And they include people management, emotional intelligence, co-coordinating with others, service orientation, as well as collaboration. As in, being able to authentically connect with other human beings is critical for both our mental health individually and our economic health collectively. As our society marches towards a world of automated workforces, online learning, and bots replacing beings, we risk eliminating the most formative human interactions. As we rapidly approach this future, organizations must be thoughtful about what could be lost and forge spaces to foster learning, belonging, and inclusion. When we learn from each other, as I learned from Donna, it was most often through interactive and informal experiences where we build our social skills, our sense of belonging, and feeling included. Despite the enormous benefits that technology brings, we must acknowledge that there is a gap, that something fundamentally will be lost and it cannot be replaced by a bot. Organizations managing large numbers of employees remotely should be asking critical questions about how to maintain human connections, grow engagement, and develop their people. Now, I'm not saying that we've just ditched technology altogether, because I do love my iPhone, which is unrealistic and negates the good it does. What I am saying is that we need to consciously create a culture of connection outside of tech platforms, and we must not compromise what makes us human. Organizations should craft and implement strategies that hold themselves accountable and demonstrate an understanding of the need for connection to facilitate learning, belonging, and inclusion in their organizations. Making sure that programs created are effective for the individual, not just effective for the organization's bottom line. Yes, it is cheaper to do a mentoring program or a coaching program or an online program, but at what cost and at what impact? So how does one create engagement in a world where you're encouraged to learn by a webinar and you're mentored by computer software? Where does this crucial human collision remain? What is the line that we're not willing to cross in regards to one-on-one human connectivity? And how can well-intended organizations and institutions manage to retain it in this increasingly automated world? Well, I would like to propose that organizations need to create a third space. Formally, third space, according to scholar and critical theorist Baba, is distinct from the first space of home or the second space, work. Most importantly, in this hybrid space is where an individual can experience transformation, a sense of self, identity, and specifically in relationships with others through discourse. In this new world, let's imagine that the first space represents organizations and the second space represents artificial intelligence or digital world or whatever you're engaging with automatically. So as we unite two distinctions, I'm going to offer organizations to forge a third space. A third space where we create, where we participate in social dynamics of human connection, where there is learning, belonging, and inclusion. This third space of culture connection. So that this concept of third space is not new to businesses. Matter of fact, most of us know about Starbucks, correct? Raise your hand. Thank you. Did you know that it was actually founded on the concept of third space, referring to another space outside of home and work where people get together to build a sense of connection and community? It was a place for coffee, but it was created for connection. The CEO, Harold Schwartz, used the concept as his cornerstone when he created Starbucks, where people are willing to pay a little bit more so that they could potentially have that connection with that coffee. And you see, I benefited from this. I benefited from this concept because when I was in graduate school working on my PhD, there's a lonely part when you're working on your dissertation at home by yourself, no classmates. So one day I was feeling alone and I decided to leave the house and go to Starbucks. I went several days. It became a habit. And one day I realized I loved coming there and I was more productive being there because I had a community. I had connection. And although I got free drinks at some point, but it wasn't the free drinks that mattered. It was the connection and the community that supported me as I completed my doctorate. So let's examine what we know about third space. The focus is how to achieve learning, belonging, inclusion by creating a space that values connection and everyday discourse. Following are 3 strategies that can be utilized to help organizations build the culture of connection. The third space, according to B, belonging, engaging, and efficiency. First, belonging. Recognize that on a group level, human interactions help us to foster learning and grow rapidly in addition to connection and community. Organizations need to provide more in-person events, trainings, and team-building activities to enable their employees to get to know each other, rather further their relationships, but most of all, contribute to each other. Allowing the employees from different locations, communities, socioeconomic backgrounds to actively participate, to create value and trust, this is a space that you're creating for connection. Next, we need to find ways to proactively inject discourse. We must remember how crucial it is to capitalize on the funds of knowledge, as in the important social and cognitive resources that each of us brings to the conversation for work and for play. Create physical spaces where people can still congregate, collaborate, and communicate in real life. Organizations need to be proactive and identify additional ways to create culture of connection that satisfies the employees' learning needs and through cultivating authentic environments. And this can be through creating spaces where one-on-one interactions can occur, where people are encouraged to participate in this safe space. That's right, I said safe space, where there is networking, connecting, and having conversations that are leaving everyone with a sense of purpose and inclusion. This is where the culture is that you create. Then finally, we have efficiency. You must combine artificial intelligence and human connection. You see, we know formal mentoring, coaching, and training programs work, and they can be adapted remotely. But we also need to create informal learning opportunities that make face-to-face interactions and connections. Think about it. There is a need for the organizations to create programs that support the individual's skills and competencies, as well as consider future platforms and their content. So in short, creating optimal efficiency. So I want to give you an example. So I recently had this firsthand experience where I did a 4-day leadership training in person over 2 months for a large international software company where technology was their life. In a span of these 4 in-person meetings over 2 months, I had 20 diverse leaders that became crystallized as a community. See, before starting the program, although they worked in the same organization and they worked in the same division, they did not know each other. So in this training, they were able to meet in person. They were able to connect during the breaks. They were able to have lunch together. And they moved through some incredible complex conversations that during these interactions, some individuals received immediate feedback to those complex conversations. So a perspective and immediacy which you can't get online. These 20 technologists who became a community also took advantage of the group's energy for their from the in-person connection. On the last day, the conversation was around, they did not know each other before the training. And because of this in-person training, they connected with others who looked like them and felt like them. This happened in person, not on an online webinar that they were watching on the laptop in their office or on the kitchen counter. So this is a perfect example that although they work for a major technology company, that they still needed human connection. The community would not have happened if this program had been online. So as use of artificial intelligence and digital spaces increases, we must consciously create in-person third spaces that foster culture of connection. As we strive for scalability of organizations and workplaces with meaningful and differentiated connection, we must develop flexible practices. To remain competitive and move forward, an organization must commit to a structured and prescribed culture of connection. If you're an organization decision maker, I call upon you to spearhead initiatives that preserve and expand third spaces of culture of connection. If you're an employee, demand connectivity in your team's culture. Push for connection and understand the power you have for platforms that are for learning, belonging, and inclusion. Ask for what you need and use technology in a way that fosters your connections. Thank you.